Okay, she's just about on. How's everyone doing? Are we ready for this?
Good.
I will tell you that this may be a hard one because we're going to go through some self-evaluation, and you're going to be receiving the self-evaluation and even an evaluation that you can give your leaders under you to evaluate you. And that's not always a comfortable thing, hearing what other people think about you, but we don't do it to hurt feelings. We do it to get better and to grow. So it's a vulnerable moment, but this is a safe environment. And I'm believing that the teams that you've surrounded yourself with are safe as well. And so it's not meant to poke fun at anybody or hurt feelings. Use it as a tool to get better. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Miss Cookie's going to hop on in just a minute. She had to reset password. It wasn't working. She tried to set up a new account. It wouldn't accept it because she already had an account. Anyway, it's fine. She's coming. So the good, the bad, the ugly of Christian leadership. I do have to tell you that this is my first time working in a ministry. Now, I've been here for, how old is Theodore? He's 6. I've been here 6 years. I started here when he was a baby, but I did grow up in a church. I say this all the time. My parents were pastors. My great-grandparents were pastors. My grandparents were pastors. My great-great-grandparents were pastors. So it is in me. I've seen it. I've been around it. My parents did a really good job of shielding me from so much of the ugly, and I didn't know about it until I was an adult. So, but what they experienced, what I've figured out, is I experienced the same, but I come from the beauty industry. I worked in spas, and a lot of the authoritative one-person leader barking orders, don't talk back situation, it's not only in the world, it is also in ministry. I'm just going to remind, since everybody's hopping on real quick, to keep your microphones muted because we have like 5 or 6 different people that are going to be speaking. So the negative with having one specific leader barking orders and not operating as a team is that you mute so many of the giftings and the graces around you. You miss out on the giftings that God has created inside people. And instead of lifting them up to have those giftings highlighted, you're shoving them down to the point that they feel useless or worthless, or they leave, or they're hurt by the church, but really it's not the church, it's the person. There's like this whole negative cascade that happens with it. So God called us to be a team. You know, God called Jesus, he had his disciples. He wasn't alone in ministry. He had people to rely on. And even in the disciples, he had like 3 that he was really close to. So there's even community throughout the Bible. Nobody was ever really doing anything alone. So that's why we're talking about this, because we want to get better. We want to use our hurts so that we can get better. So let's have some conversation. Miss Cookie, I'm so glad you can join us.
Yeah. That was awesome. I had so much fun on that, let me tell you.
I'm sure you did. Okay, so I just kind of explained why we were talking about this topic a little bit. I'm sure you could have done it better. But I'm looking over my notes. Give me just a minute here.
Okay.
Okay, has anybody, I was talking to Ernie, I was talking to everybody about this yesterday. On Tuesday, no, yesterday was Wednesday. On Wednesdays, we do our book meeting, and we have been going through this book, Culture Code. And in Culture Code, it's talking about different areas to feel safe. And so it was referencing starlings and how they have this like telepathic almost way that they communicate, but it's not telepathic. Each bird only pays attention to like 5 or 6 people around them. And when they move, if one moves, then that moves. And so I'm sure you've seen them in the sky where they're all going and They just keep moving and flocking. And it's like this really cool geometric design, almost like those 90s screensavers. Does anybody remember those? Where it was like the slinky type thing going across the screen. It was really fun. Anyway, that's what starlings do. They don't pay attention to the mass amount, which can be thousands of birds. They only pay attention to the 6 people around them. And that's really what we need to be doing as leaders. Instead of having one person dictate where we're going, what we're doing, have a team of us that flow and fluid and move together. And a lot of us coming out of church, growing up in church, that didn't happen. That didn't always happen. Solo, is there anything that you remember from when you first, because you weren't always in ministry, he was a police officer, he was also a DJ. Solo, is there anything that you have taken from your past to help you get over the hurt and grow the team that you have now?
I think probably one of the biggest takeaways was trying to get to understand people's perspective. That's probably the biggest thing. It's one thing to, when you're leading, a lot of times you're so busy and so concerned with conveying your vision, conveying your mission, conveying the next project, that you forget that other people actually have lives.
Yeah.
Have families and jobs and things and so forth. And so I think for me, the biggest transition from being the leader, God's mouthpiece, so to speak, was actually allowing the closer staff, volunteer staff. So we operate off of volunteer staff, but allowing them to express their perspective of what we were doing as a church and what we were doing, whether it was a project, whether it was an event, or just changing some systems, just really just having them come in. Because as a police officer, one of the things that you have to do is you collect evidence, right? So you're literally getting everybody's perspective when you're doing interviews. So you get a call, and so you're going to each individual and you're talking to each one. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you experience? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you experience? What did you see? And so once you finish that, you literally compile your report and say, this is what we believe happened. This is what the crime that was committed. And so then you start moving forward. And so a lot of that really been able to bring that over into ministry when you start leading from that perspective. So now you're just going, okay, let me collect all the evidence. Let me see the facts. Let's see what the facts are. What is their perspective on this? How does this work in children's ministry? Is it affecting this area? And so when you begin to do that, you can actually make better choices, better decisions, and you're actually able to lead everyone together, because now you're not just saying, you're not assuming that they have the same wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that you have. So now you're actually able to gather that information. And so that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped me transition as far as the way that I lead and the way that we lead here at the church.
And I love what you talked about. We haven't touched on this in a while. You said you have volunteer staff. And that's such a great perspective, because a lot of times as leaders, we turn into the one person because we maybe don't have a paid staff. And so we don't think that we can put those expectations of a paid staff onto volunteers. But through Radke's teaching, we learned that whether you're paid or not paid, the expectations remain as long as we can clearly communicate that. That was a hard thing for me to be able to do when I deal with a lot of volunteers, have clear expectations of what I'm needing them to do, and then also expect them to follow through. Now, people have the right to turn it down. They have the right to, not be able to do it, and that's okay. But I still have to set those expectations of what I'm needing them to do, whether they're paid or they're volunteered. Lonnie, what about you? You've been preparing for this. I do have to tell everybody that this kind of was birthed out of Lonnie's heart. A number of months ago, we were having really good conversation in one of our strategic planning meetings. And Lonnie's heart was just flourishing for learning from the past to help the future. So Lonnie, what are your thoughts on what we're talking about?
Well, appreciate what Scylla was sharing about asking people questions. You know, that goes right along with our coaching approach.
Yeah.
Because when you listen to someone, really listen to them, you're giving them value. And you'll get more from the people, you'll get their heart, not just their ability. When you ask somebody and then value their comments. And there's times when a comment may be given and you may not even understand it fully, but that's when you begin to even ask even more questions. Would you please explain that a little bit more to me? We had a volunteer staff too when I was pastoring, but I expected something from them as if they were already paid.
Yes.
I mean, they responded, they had reports in, they kept me informed. There was a term we used to use though with my staff, first among equals, because people listen to what we're saying right now. They may think, well, you're doing away with the pastor of having responsibility. No, the pastor has a responsibility to pull this out of those gifts that God has placed around them. It doesn't take away from your authority or responsibility. It's going to enhance you when you see that you haven't got all the gifts and graces yourself.
Man, that's good, Lonnie.
But see, it's a healthy leader that's going to have a healthy staff.
Yes, 100%. I'll give an example because nobody has done that yet. And mine is not from ministry, so maybe it's a little bit safer. I worked at this spa and I was an esthetician. So I did facials and eyelash extensions and waxings and things like that. So we had a lead esthetician. There was a team of 4 of us, and we had one that was a lead esthetician. So she was in charge of making sure we were all trained on the different procedures that we had to do. We were introducing a new procedure, and it was all something that we had already done, but we were just kind of changing it up a little bit. So she pulls us in and we're going over it. And we disagreed with the order that she was telling us to do something in because it went against our training that we had already trained. She got so mad at us that we disagreed with the order. Now she's the head esthetician. And so that was like her stance was, well, I'm the lead esthetician. This is what I'm blah, blah, blah. And so then we just had to sit there and be like, okay, it just goes against what we were trained. And if this is the way you want it done, okay. So that was one example, but it happened over and over and over again. I was there for 2 years. And by the time I left, I had been beaten down so much. I used to be a very, not in a bad way, but opinionated person. And I wasn't afraid to speak my mind. I wasn't afraid to ask questions. And by the time I left there, I didn't know who I was. I couldn't ask questions. Like even when I started at FCF, which was a year after I left that place, I can't tell you how long it took me to get to feeling like I was really actually in a safe place to ask questions again and challenge the status quo. That's just kind of always who I've been, is never really do something because it's how it's always been.
I can't imagine where you get that.
Yeah, I don't know. For those of you that don't know, Cookie is my mother. I do call her Miss Cookie out of respect when we're at work, but I do also refer to her as Mom or Marmy or Cooka because that's what my kids call her. So anyway, if you constantly are not giving place to the people under you to flow in the natural gift that God has given them, they're either going to lose who God created them to be, or they're going to find someone else who will celebrate them. And it is your job as that leader, like Lonnie was saying, to lift them up, to be everything that God has called them to be, not to be intimidated or challenged by a strength of theirs that may be your weakness, but to keep lifting them up. You're called to be the head of your ministry. You're called to be the head of your church. That's something totally different than what God is calling them to do. Maybe God is calling them to be an usher. And in doing so, they can be a fantastic systems implementer and whatever that looks like. But you're maybe a little iffy because it steps on some of your toes and you want it to control. Get out of your own way and let these people do what God is calling them to do. Ultimately, they're there to serve you. They're there to serve you. They're there to serve God. And you're now stepping in their way. I know that may ruffle some feathers. Miss Cookie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm the same way. You know, I can speak to this from both sides because I've led rather autocratically when we pastored, not horribly, because I've served under some very, very autocratic leaders that it's my way or no way, get in line or get out. And so, you know, I have had that experience. So I can't say that I was that kind of autocratic leader, but I did have that exampled for me and did kind of stay in that lane, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I would say that when I pastored, the good thing for me was I pastored with my husband, and my husband had a real pastoral gift who was very kind and gracious. And so that helped bring some balance to my, you know, narrow way of doing things. And thank God he was the lead at that time and I was the support. So, you know, I had to get out of the way more often than not. But but then coming into this situation where I am the lead and having experienced such pain of autocratic leadership, both having experienced it serving and then having experienced it as a leader and regretted things, chose to really dig in and examine, what does healthy leadership really look like? And can I have the emotional EQ or IQ, whatever it is, to be able to say it's not all about me, you know, that this is God's vision and God calls people together. And if he calls us together, then there must be something these people are bringing to the table that either I don't have or they have more of or better or whatever. And I need to be able to get, like you said, out of my own way. I need to be able to take my pride and my false expectations of what leadership looks like and move out of the way and let these gifts shine. You know, one of the big keys that Dr. Radke teaches us is that we want to pour everything we can into the people that are with us, whether they're staff or volunteer, and disciple them to the fullest, for whether they're there for 6 weeks or 6 years or 60 years, however long they're with you. That way, if they ever leave, you're sending the best of God's kingdom out to further the gospel.
Yeah.
Wherever they go. And so it becomes bigger than you. It's not about you and your leadership. If you can take yourself out of that equation and put yourself in the place of, this is about God's purposes. And if it's about his purposes, then I have a responsibility to be the best I can be as a leader. And that is not being insecure in myself when somebody is better at something than I am, not being insecure in myself in that they could probably do a better job at this job than I am, but I'm the one that God put here. So if God put me here, then I have to trust that he's got a plan, and I'm going to press into everything I can to be the best I can be at that job.
Yeah,
even if there's
good.
somebody that from the natural would seem like they'd probably do better. But if God didn't call him and he called me, then I can't do a comparison.
Right.
Amen.
Cello just made a social media post about that earlier today.
Yes.
Go
Stop
Cello.
comparing.
So one of the things you talk about, you mentioned, Ms. Cookie, about moving yourself out of the way. So I'm going to just give a real, Whitney gave an example. So about a month ago, we had a project, and we have our soundboard, and we needed to extend our soundboard because we had doing some streaming, and we added some computers and some monitors. So it was really, really tight, and we needed to extend our soundboard. In order to extend our soundboard, we had to move seating around. So the seating had to be moved first in order for us to extend soundboard. And so we had bought some chairs a while back, and they needed to be refinished. And so it was a Thursday evening or late afternoon. Our worship team practices on Thursdays. And so I was in the back of the church with the door propped open, and I was back there sanding these chairs, prepping them to paint, because we needed to get them so we could get them set so we could get this move forward on the other part. So one of our volunteer staff on our strategic team walked in and asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm sanding chairs. And she says, why are you sanding chairs? And so I began to tell her, well, I need to sand the chairs so that I can paint the chairs, so that I can rearrange the chairs so that we can build the extension on the soundboard so we can have enough. And she says, you're telling me, what I hear you saying, Pastor, is that there's nobody else in this church that can sand chairs. There's nobody else in this church that can paint chairs. And I said, well, no, that's not really it. It's just I'm here and I can get it done rather quick because I'm here already and I can have it done. It's just so you would rather do it yourself than give somebody else the opportunity to serve. So I said, okay, so what do I need to do then? And she says, well, if you allow me, I'll find somebody to sand these chairs, finish sanding them, painting them. And I said, okay. I said, well, then that'll work because then I can start working on the soundboard. She goes, oh, I guess you didn't learn. She says, you're telling me there's nobody in this congregation that can build and extend that soundboard. And I said, well, yes, there's actually 2 people that I know are capable of doing that. She says, okay. So I gave her the names and she says, okay, well, then I'll make sure that they get that soundboard extended. The hardest part about removing yourself from a leadership perspective and giving other people to opportunity to serve is, number one, they're not going to do it in a timely manner that you want them to. And the second thing is that they're not going to do it exactly the way that you want. So while I was there at the church, while I was here at the church, they were coming in, they were handling this stuff, they were getting everything done. And so I was here while that individual was building the soundboard. And I just went along and said, let me help you. And so I was just there kind of helping them build the soundboard. And the most excruciating pain just came upon me while I was watching this 2-day process. Was one, it was taking too long. And 2, I would never build a soundboard the way that they were extending it out. I would have not done it that way. And so I was just so frustrated. I got home and I was just tired. And Mia says, what's wrong? I said, well, I'm mentally tired because I'm not saying anything about the way it's being done. And it's really tough. And she says, so what are you gonna do about it? I said, well, I have to go back tomorrow and watch the same process again. And so by the time that both of those projects were done, everybody that was in leadership was excited about it. I was actually pleased with the way everything turned out, even though it was not done in the time that I wanted it. I wanted to have it done, and it wasn't done the way that I felt like it should done. But when they finished, it was quality. Everything was quality. And so the thing that I guess I want us to understand as leaders is that sometimes we have people in our congregation, in our leadership, that are willing to serve, that we're not giving them the opportunity. And we have to be willing to listen to those that are serving alongside us and those who are leading us, give them the opportunity to push back on some of the things that we're doing so that we can give opportunity. So the person that approached me about that, they didn't sand the chairs and they didn't build the soundboard. They merely facilitated that taking place. And so they found somebody to do that. And as a leader, exactly what Ms. Cookie said, we have to remove ourselves from the equation so that people can fulfill the purpose and the callings that God has for them, to be able to be involved in ministry at the most, even if it's the smallest level of what's taking place. And so when everyone came in, when those 2 things were done, everybody was excited and applauded, and they were like, man, this is so good. And I was just like, yeah, that was all me. I let that happen.
So a few things really quick. You may have seen me, my mom, and my dad, who is Fred, also on here, Mountain Mole. He worked in the mine in the mountains. It's fine. Anyway, you may have seen us laughing or giggling through this because this was 100% my father while he was pastoring. The lawn needed to be mowed. Mind you, the land that the church owned, how many acres was it? 7?
Almost 8.
Almost 8 acres. And he was the one that would go and mow. And there was a pool, and he was the one that would do everything with the pool. Now, for him, mowing was like this whole mind cleansing thing. It was very calming for him. So he liked to do that. I understand. But I'm just wondering if we had come up with the schedule. I say we, I didn't do anything there. If someone had come up with the schedule and made it available for people to volunteer, how much time would it have saved you, Dad? How much energy would it have saved you where your efforts and energy could have been put forth into other areas? One of the things also, Salo, I want to ask you, do you think there was a better way for you to hand that off? Were you able to set expectations for how you wanted it done? Like, not to control it, but were you able to say, I need it to look like da 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 da, and they did it?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It just wasn't done the way
I wanted
it done, but it met
exactly.
the expectations.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, just making sure.
No, absolutely. The quality of everything was, and because we really pride ourselves on affordable excellence, right? So
Yes.
that was it. Like this is their expectations. This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I want it to be able to do. That, you know, basically just laid out all the expectations. I think the only thing that I did not communicate was the time frame. But I didn't realize that till after it was already going. So it was kind of hard to go like, can we speed the process up?
Everything is a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll never forget to set a time frame on the next one, right?
Exactly. But as far as setting the expectations, all I did was just say, this is what I'm looking for, and this is why I want it this way.
That's good.
Can I interject here, Whitney?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think of when you talk about this, Cello, is often for leaders, this comes back to not really even knowing clarity yourself. And so then when you don't have clarity, you have some ideas, you maybe have a big vision idea, and you have some thoughts about what that might look like. And then when you go to empower people, you want to micromanage because you just feel like, I need to stay with this because I need to make sure it's going to go the way I want. But the reality is, if you don't have that clarity, you have to trust.
Yes.
You have to
absolutely.
trust. But if you do have that clarity, then you have the responsibility to communicate. But at the same time, I don't think it's right, personally, I don't think it's right to require people to do something the way you would do it.
That was a hard lesson.
I think the best thing is to let them figure out, giving time frame, because you're growing gifts. And let's all face it, we don't grow. Because if you just keep succeeding at something, you don't change. This is working, I'm going to keep going. Yeah, but if you mess up, you've got to grow. You've got to figure something out. So you have to give people room to fail. That's why Dr. Radke talks about celebrating noble failures.
Noble failures.
Because a noble failure is a failure that you learn from. And so the value of letting them fail at something is that now you're able to come in and create a safe space that says, what can we learn from this? Not blaming them, but saying, how do we as a team get better from this situation? And what's some ways we could have, you go back and do that, what's it called, that after action review? Go back and do an after action review and say, okay, where did we mess this up? Where did we get off track? What could we have done better? And you come in with your own recognition as a leader. Here's where I should have been tracking every so often on this and make sure you guys were on track, or I'm sorry I let you down there. What, you go through all of those things. Jesse, I can see you want to jump on this.
Oh, well, I was just thinking, I've never met a leader that didn't think that they were a pretty good leader and also at the same time hope to become a better leader. And so I assume everybody on this call thinks they're a pretty good leader, but yet there's room for improvement. And I would say that that's probably pretty accurate too. But also I know for myself, pastoring now for pushing 14 years, that it's easy to forget what it's like when you are not the point person. Yes. When you're not the one giving the direction, when you're not the one equipped with your perspective and the details that you know and everything that you're armed with, you can take for granted that somebody else should already agree with you just because you're in charge anyway. And so the fact that they have a difference of opinion, the fact that they would do it differently, the fact that they are maybe in left field compared to you is maybe because you have not shared with them what you know. Come on. And it's possible that if you would actually take the time to share with them how you came to where you're at, they may come to that same place too. Otherwise, if you don't take the time to do that, all of a sudden there's that tension and frustration. And then you start thinking, they don't trust me. They don't respect the anointing on my life. They this or they that. And then all of a sudden insecurities start coming up. And then this division is there when it's possibly just because, take ownership as a leader, that you did not share your heart with them. And if you don't share your heart with them, then you are not duplicating yourself. You're just trying to get people to do tasks the way you want. And so, and I've been on the receiving end of that. I remember before pastoring, I was at a ministry, and I was at that ministry for about 10 years. But when I got hired at that ministry, I was doing multimedia, audio engineering type stuff. And I had a little closet with sound panels in it in my editing computer. And I would go sit in that little closet, and nobody asked me my opinion about anything. I would wait until I was told what to do. I was told, this is the product you're going to make. This is what it is. This is the timing. It was just all directed to me. Nobody asked my opinion about anything. The leadership changed, and the new leadership loved Dean Radke and started implementing Dean Radke's system of building teams and allowing teams to give input. And whenever that was the case, it was one of the first times I was brought into an office and said, hey, what do you think we could do to make the audio better? It's like, if anybody knows, like at that level, what could be improved, it would be the people doing it day after day after day. And yet people with no clue were the ones telling me how to do it. And so I was like, oh, well, actually, at that time, we didn't even have CDs. It was still using cassette tapes. And I was like, well, every car for the last 5 years only has CD players. And so I would think that it'd probably be a good idea to have CDs. And so, but being able to actually give ideas that otherwise they wouldn't have been thinking of, actually was able to make great strides and improvements. And so not only those results, but what it did for me as a person in allowing me to have input, then there was a drive inside of me to care about that department more. There was a drive inside of me to want these CDs to be the best because they were my ideas. And so charged with getting the right CD copiers, CD printers, to be charged to get all of that kind of stuff, then I cared about it. And it consumed me, where I was thinking of every possible avenue to make it the best outcome and fighting for it because I had ownership of it. And that challenges me even now as a pastor, where if I'm asking somebody to fulfill my vision and fulfill my plan, then how passionate are they going to be about that? But if I can cast some vision where they now have their own vision for it and their own purpose for it and their passion, and I can just empower them and give them the opportunity to give me feedback, just what a difference that makes. Yeah. And what a healthier environment that is too. And after 14 years, I suck at it still. There are so many times that I do a poor job of communicating it. There's times that I swoop in to fill in the gaps instead of calling people up to their commitment. And guess what? There is nothing wrong with holding people accountable to what they committed to. It doesn't matter if they're a volunteer, if they have twins. It doesn't matter if they're going through a layoff. If they said they were going to be there, and if they don't communicate that they're not, and they're late, nothing's wrong with the text saying, hey, I expected you 10 minutes ago. Is everything okay? Where are you at? There's nothing wrong with that. And so, but yet that's something that I struggle with all the time. Yeah. And I think that the conversations like this help remind me that I need to text a few people when we're done here.
It's so good. And unfortunately, like in the self-evaluation, and this is what's going to be hard for some people, there are two questions that we've talked about so far. One being, is your way the only right way? And it's a yes or no question. Is your way the only right way? The other one is, are you a vision hoarder? Now, that may be an interesting topic because you hear from God, you hear the vision, and then you are supposed to send it on down, right? You're like a vessel that you just send the vision right on down, but that doesn't always happen. What happens a lot of times, and Laura, I would love your take on this. What happens is you hear the vision, and then instead of passing it down, you bark orders of how things need to be done, like we've been talking about. There are some people who never hear the vision of the church or the ministry or the area that they're volunteering in. They just hear what they need to do. They never hear why they need to do it. Laura, how did that affect you? First of all, have you volunteered for someone that was or worked for someone that was a vision hoarder? And if so, how did that affect you in your commitment to that position?
Well, yes. My commitment though, I'm a totally different kind of person. than
You're a total
some
what?
people. I'm a different
Speak
kind
up.
of, sorry,
Okay.
different kind of person. Well, I love expectations, love them. I want to know exactly what you want from me, what's expected, when and how. Love it. However, if people don't give that to me, I will make up my own.
Mm,
And so I'll make up my own time frame. I'll make up my own flow chart. I'll make up whatever needs to happen to get the whatever it is done. However, then you come back to, well, that's not what I wanted.
yeah, but they didn't give
They
that.
never
So then
gave
how
me
does that make you
expectations.
feel?
So it makes you feel terrible. Like I've done this, poured my heart out into this. I've spent hours doing it. And you've seen me do it the whole time, and now it's wrong.
Yeah,
And then they want to change it. So it makes you not want to give your best
right.
to that situation. It makes it hard to buy into any kind of a thing that they say. Because something's always changing and you don't really know exactly why you're doing it, what the outcome is supposed to be. And honestly, vision is important. If the person or the leader doesn't have a clear, direct vision from God or whatever they're supposed to be doing, and they change it weekly, I mean,
Where are you supposed to stand?
you
There's
can't
no
stand
solid ground.
anywhere because you're not on solid ground. And then you're frustrated and you're looking for a new job and you don't want to bring volunteers into a position, because you don't want people to be treated that way. And so when they're like, well, why don't you have volunteers and all this? I'm like, well, because you, but
I was one time
but you
brought
don't
in.
say that.
Laura and I have similar experience because neither of us have been pastors. So
Right.
we have a different perspective than everybody else on our strategic planning team because neither of us have been pastor. So we come at it from a supportive role. And there was one time I had someone pull me in and ask me some questions of why I thought the church wasn't growing. And I flat out said, well, I don't even know the vision of the church. And you say it's this, but how does it do this? And what does it do? And I gave
Exactly.
examples and we brainstormed together and then nothing happened. Nothing happened. And it was like, well, I guess that was a waste of an hour and a half because literally nothing changed. If you are inviting someone in to hear their opinion and you do nothing with it, you might as well not even bring them in to hear their opinion because the worst thing they can do is be heard and ignored.
Amen.
There you go.
Exactly.
You've just devalued them.
Yes.
Completely
There's no
devalued.
value
Mhm.
to their opinion. There's no value. Why are you even asking me a question?
What's the point?
And you know what turned you into? A yes person.
Or sitting back down and
Yeah.
saying, we heard everything you had to say. I took it to our team. This is the process we went through, and this is what we're considering. What do you think of that? Get an opinion based on,
Right.
we heard what you said. We're not sure it works. We're thinking of this direction. What do you think? And that way you're still saying, we still value you.
Mhm.
Even though we don't want to implement what you want, we'd love to see what you think about this path.
That's good.
The whole point here is letting people know their voice is being heard.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you don't listen to the people that God has placed around you, you'll eventually be surrounded with people who have nothing to say.
That's right.
good.
That's right.
That's exactly
Did you
right.
say that, Lonnie? Was that you that said that in a meeting recently? Or was that in a video we watched? What was that?
Oh, I'll take the credit for it.
You
Yeah,
take the
I'm
credit
sure it was
for it.
Lonnie. It was Lonnie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think-
Yeah,
think-
I was
Go ahead, Jesse.
Lonnie, I was thinking the same thing as far as you said it so eloquently. I had written down that you'll only attract weak people because for me, I'm not going to, you're going to attract people that aren't strong leaders. You're going to attract people that don't have the energy and capability to lead others well and to execute projects well. if you don't change that structure of leadership that allows them to serve at that capacity. The capacity of person that I am right now, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm devalued. I would get bored so quickly. I would check out. I'd say, hey, you're saved. I'm saved. You'll be my neighbor in heaven. I want nothing to do with you, pal. I'm going over here. That's what I would do. And I wouldn't talk bad about them behind their back doing it. I would just disappear and they'd wonder where I am. My son, Cole, he's 16, just started a job, Sonic drive-through. And the first day he came home, and I said, hey, how'd it go? And he was like, yeah, well, it went pretty good. I said, well, did they treat you okay? Because you don't have to put up with it if they don't value you. I'm not going to let my 16-year-old son work in an environment where he's devalued. And in the same sense, I mean, how much greater within the body of Christ, brothers and sisters united in baptism, that we should value each other. And so if we're going to ask somebody to be on a team to serve, to give up their Sunday morning an hour and a half earlier to be there, to watch our kids, to do whatever, then create an environment that values them, where they matter, where you want their input. Man, you'll draw out the best people. You'll bring strong people that want to be a part of that.
That's right. Okay, there are two people that are being extra quiet right now, Ernie and Fred. Ernie was just about to speak. What were you about to say?
I was just going to say that one of the things that this speaks of is the responsibility of the leader to take on stewardship, to embrace stewardship. It could be argued that our greatest stewardship is an eternal stewardship, the stewardship of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we also have a stewardship towards something else that's eternal, and that's people. And the people that God gives us, we are to steward them in a way whereby we can help bring the very best out of them, that we can help to develop. It doesn't mean that we're developing them, right? I mean, the Spirit of God's at work in their lives. There are other inputs into their lives, but we play a role as the leader to assist, to help, bring the very best out of them. We're anointed. We're anointed by God to help bring that to pass. And I think that it's easy for leaders, and I'm speaking, I guess, primarily from a pastoral role. It's been part of my experience as well. But I think it's easy as pastors to easily focus on the vision that's been given to us and trusted into our care, to mobilize people to make sure that we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, but at the same time, potentially neglecting opportunities given to us to develop those people. So they end up serving us or serving God, if you will, but not really being challenged to grow and develop in the ways that they can. I think another thing that we're talking about here is empowerment, the empowerment of people. And you have to be a very secure leader in order to empower others. And it requires a lot of things we've talked about, a lot of things dealing with character, good communication. We've touched on that. Patience, it requires a lot of patience to work with people. I've found a number of them don't have the perfect ideas that I do, and they don't always do things the right way like I do, and so it requires patience, doesn't it, for others to express their gifts, to develop creativity, to innovate in ways that we may never have thought of, and to trust them. A novel thought sometimes is the idea that perhaps others would have a better idea, right, than we do, or come up with better solutions to what we might come up with for particular situations. But when we work together as a team, we're really bringing out the best of each member to produce something powerful for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, that's good. Jeff, I see your comment in the chat box. That is a great comment, first of all. You did miss the beginning where I said we're all going to be discussing this after we get through just a few things that were on our heart as the strategic team talks. So if there's anything that you want to bring back up, make sure you take a note of it. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up and all start having dialogue about what we've talked about. Because again, the only way we can get better is if we talk about it, acknowledge it, and continue to go. So yes, you are correct.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things as far as realizing that you might be a vision hoarder is the inability to allow the people to carry the vision out for you. Given the ownership, giving them the responsibility. Because what sometimes what happens is we get the vision from God and it's our vision, not their vision. So this is how it has to take place. And so
Right.
I think it's one thing to receive the vision, but we have to trust the gifts and talents that are inside folks and let them carry the vision that God's given, let them help build it. Moses, he was given the whole concept of the tabernacle, but he wasn't the guy that built it.
Right. Pastor Fred, I know you're not a pastor anymore, but we're going to call you Pastor Fred. I've been wondering while we've been talking about this, you no longer pastor a church, but what would have this information meant to you while you were pastoring? I don't know what kind of conversations you and your leadership team had at that time. Were they ever, around this type of topic, or, the majority of what was exampled to you may not have been like all about this. So I'm interested to hear from you how it could have changed things.
Let me back up and I'm not trying to justify myself in any ways.
Never.
But when you've, I never saw myself at any time of being a senior pastor of a church. I was very satisfied to serve under a leader, under a vision, to help somebody else accomplish what God had appointed them to do. But in doing so, when you worked under toxic leadership, I think it's almost like there's like a tablet of stone that you're writing life lessons. If I ever do something on my own, I want to make sure I don't do this to people. And so I don't know that we're actually, but notes are being made in our lives when we work, whether it's volunteer or we're on staff. Notes are being made in our hearts, our souls, of pains that we've suffered, things that we wouldn't do. And so when you talked about me doing all the mowing, the term the servant leader, I never wanted to ask somebody to do something that I wasn't willing and part of a team in doing.
Sure.
And so I started mowing at 5 o'clock on Friday mornings, and it probably took me like 5 hours. And then on Saturday morning, we had a team of about 20, both men and women, that would show up to help fancy all the shrubs, the flowers, the trimming. And so it was a very healthy thing as far as building a team. But I remember when Buddy Harrison started Father's House Church, and we were up on the 70th floor of the Cityplex. All our equipment was down on the first floor. And so we had to show up early enough to move everything up, set it up, get ready for the service, operate the service. And then when everybody had left, then we would stay there with the carts and take everything down. And I remember when we started doing that, Pastor Buddy Harrison was sitting in the back of the auditorium on a seat. And I went back to him and I said, "Dad, please," I said, like, we had our service. It would just be good for you to go home. I want you to go home and rest. And he said, "I can't go home and rest." He said, "My heart is here with the church." He said, "I can't move anything. I can't carry anything, but the least I can do is to sit here and to honor those that are helping fulfill the call." And so before me was a man that was modeling such servant leadership, who carried such a heart for people. It wasn't just about him. He cared so genuinely for every individual, regardless of their task, whether it was very menial or something more major. He showed such respect and honor to every individual. And I was simply wanting to carry that out. But I just don't want people to go do something that, let's form a team, let's do it in community. And so now, not being a pastor and being part of a church, it's such a unique thing now to be part of the community of a church and building relationships with people and helping the man at the top to fulfill and to walk out what God has assigned to his life.
That's so sweet. Everybody's talking about how wrong they've been or how bad they've messed up. And you're like, I just wanted to be a servant leader. Your tender heart really shines.
Let me just say, when we talked about toxic leadership, just another term for toxic is poison. There's a TV thing on Discovery. I think it's called the Pain Kings. There's two men that allow
Hugo's
themselves
obsessed with it.
to be bitten by reptiles, insects, fish, and then they rate the degree of pain, and then they also rate the duration of the effects of the pain. And so I'm thinking, when we think of toxic leadership, not everybody dies instantly, but things that are injected into their system, then in the long run, it wears them down, wears them out. And there's a lot of people that have just kind of walked away from church because of toxic leadership.
Well,
MacGyver showed up.
That's so
MacGyver
good.
showed up.
just showed up, dude. That was awesome.
I was thinking, could we at FCF, could we come up with some kind of breath analyzer where we could blow to determine how toxic our leadership degree would be? And then we can make a t-shirt. You're a 6 on the scale to 10, or I'm a 3, or
Oh my
I'm a
gosh.
9. No.
Do you remember do you remember when we first took over the church and we sat down with our team and we were talking about the toxicity of the leadership that we came out of and what we wanted to learn from that so that we didn't bring that to the table when we were pastoring? And we talked about having t-shirts made that said, "Welcome to Father's house, where nobody's going to manipulate, dominate, or control you."
That's right.
It was, but that tells you how long that's been in our hearts. So clearly we had been bitten deep and hard. The effects lasted a long time.
You didn't force the people to wear the t-shirts, did you?
No, we never made them. Thank God, we never made them.
Well, I'm happy to say that we made it through, everybody on the panel talking about toxic leadership and how we can grow from our hurts and our past. And now I want to open this up for open dialogue. There are a lot of us on here, but if anybody has questions or wants to talk through something, or maybe you need some brainstorming help, we're here to help navigate all of this together. None of us are experts, but we've done a lot of research and we're willing to have conversations. So if anybody has questions, comments, conversations, let's go. Anybody? Anybody? Nobody wants to be the first.
I'll jump
It's
in.
okay. Come on in, John.
I was actually, while Ernie was talking, I was thinking about Matthew chapter 9, the end of that, and then in through chapter 10, and just that place of the example that Jesus provided, in that place where he saw the problem, the revelation of the issue came, he expressed the need, cast the vision, then he engaged the disciples to pray about the solution. He didn't just tell them what, the answer, but he engaged them to begin to pray about the solution. Then he trained who he had and deployed them to be a part of the answer. And I was just thinking about that in that place of when those things come back, and it's not the way that we want to do it or we think about it, that is such a critical time to teach, train, coach, and mentor, to share to them so they can begin to think the way that you think about the problem, not necessarily telling them what to do, but to then to instruct and to teach others how to think about the problem in the same way that you're looking at it.
Mm.
What I like about that, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in. What I like about that, John, is a lot of times we come out of those environments where they say, don't point out a negative unless you want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
And I think that's unhealthy. I think we have to create a space where people can come in and say, you know what, I'm aware of this. I don't know if I know the answers, but I'm willing for you to help me learn how to be a part of those solutions, or for you to say as a leader, I appreciate you bringing that to the table. Do you mind if I ask you to go pray and study and research and see if you can come up with some answers? See if you can help make some things happen, because you're positioning them to grow, just like you talked about. And I value that. That's a great perspective, John.
I think I was thinking about what I was sharing with you guys about the soundboard and the seating project. And as John was sharing, I had the thought, I was literally the one that created the project and the obstacles because 3 months before one of our IT guys, I said, what do we need to do to expand on our streaming? And so, well, we need another computer. We're going to need 2 more monitors. I said, okay, what is it going to take to make that happen? So I got it. So he made it happen. But when he made that happen, for me, we lost room on our soundboard. And so I was literally the one that created the obstacles and the challenges because of the vision that I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something. So sometimes I think that in the vision and in moving it forward, we create those obstacles, not really realizing that they're just trying to help us fulfill it. But then we have to, in turn, let them own it and be a part of it. And so I was just, as John was talking, I was just going, man, I was literally the guy that started the whole domino effect, you know, and I didn't even, it never dawned on me until literally just this moment when John was talking.
Ernie, you were going to say something in response to John. What were you going to say?
I think it's sort of a double-sided coin in that sometimes, yes, the leader needs to revisit the work that was done, you know, talk it through, have it be a coaching moment or a teachable moment. You know, that's certainly valid. Absolutely. I also think there are times when things may not be done exactly like we would have done it as the leader. And it becomes a teachable moment for us to just be able to say, you know, that's okay. You know, these folks have poured their, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into this. And you would do best just to learn from it yourself and to develop a little more patience and willingness to go with the flow and to recognize that not everything's non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I saw your mic was unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to add to this or question?
I did have a couple of questions, but I want
let's go.
One quick comment. I was in the U.S. Air Force for 24 and a half years, and I'm sorry I can't animate today. There is something wrong with the camera at my end. But I can remember real well being a junior major at a new command, a new job. And my colonel brought me in and he really scolded me. And I thought I'd been doing a great job. And he said, Jeff, you are doing a great job, but you're doing the work that the people working for you should be doing. So I wanted to know that whoever made the comments about, you know, let's let the person in charge do a little less and delegate a little more, that was right on that. And he scolded me and he said, a year from now, that better not be the case. You better be supervising the lieutenants from the Air Force Academy that are paid to do that work and not doing it yourself. And we've often talked about no one ministering alone. I'm not trying to play stump the panel or anything like that, but I'd appreciate anybody's insight into the role of Judas as a possible exception to that. I've never heard a conservative viewpoint on this topic, but I've heard a liberal preach about Judas, and he said Judas was almost, this is a liberal viewpoint, not necessarily proven biblically at all. He said Judas was almost certainly on the inner circle with Peter, James, and John. But when the men went to write the Gospels, they didn't want to embarrass anybody, so they left that out. And the main example he used of that, or evidence, was the fact that Judas was the bag man. And I think you've all seen the liberal movie Jesus Christ Superstar or heard the album. And at the end of the movie scene, as they're rolling the credits on the original, Jesus and Judas get on the bus together as they're driving out of wherever it was filmed. And Jesus has his arm around Judas and is patting him on the back. And that is the ultra liberal view of the situation. But I agree with FCF and the motto, you know, that no one ought to minister alone. And I appreciate that so much. And I don't minister alone. But what about Judas, and what can we learn from his situation?
Man, that's a fun question. First of all, Judas Iscariot wasn't the only Judas, right? I mean, all of us have felt betrayed by someone in our inner circle. Someone's let us down, someone's betrayed us, maybe not to the point of death, the way Judas did to Jesus, but we've all experienced that level. Lonnie, a wise one.
Oh,
What say you?
well, I'm just sitting here thinking about, okay, Judas, I look at the way Jesus ministered to him. Look there at the Last Supper, what he did. He served him.
He knew.
He washed his feet.
Mm-hmm.
He gave him opportunity after opportunity to change, but he made his own decision. So when I see how Jesus treated someone who was going to betray him, how much more of an example is that for us and how
Yeah.
we should treat the people around us,
That's
giving
good.
them the opportunity to change.
Jesse, you unmuted. You must have something to say. I knew you would.
Well, that's a great question. I love the question.
Yeah.
From a scholarly just thought about the liberal interpretation of scripture and whether or not they didn't include some of that to save face. I have a hard time kind of making that connection because they wrote all sorts of embarrassing things. They didn't hold back at all from saying it was women that found Jesus and believed him. We were all hiding scared, and so I think that them trying to save face probably wasn't motivation in them writing. But I do think for an application of that narrative would be echoing what Pastor Lonnie said, is that we don't know people's hearts. And so is there a chance that there's somebody on our team that doesn't have our heart, that isn't in line with us, maybe is a wolf in sheep's clothing? Sure, that could happen. It's still worth making a team. Even with that risk, it's still worth investing in people. And I even think about the parable of the sower with the different types of soil. If I was as a pastor, teacher of the word, if I said, you know what, I'm going to reserve my words for only people that are going to receive it. I'm only going to give my words to people that are going to plant that and it actually produce and grow. Well, excuse me? Good. Just keep your mouth shut, and so even as leaders, the risk of people betraying us, the risk of people hurting us, it's going to happen. It's going to happen as a continual process within ministry. And we have to keep our heart right that I'm responsible as a leader, accountable to God for what I'm doing. On my team, they're responsible to God for how they're serving in this capacity, not just me, but God.
Yes.
And that's between them and God. Obviously, I can have some boundaries, I can have some parameters, and if they're not living up to their commitments, then there's times I might need to remove them from a team, but not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of honoring what God has given us to do. And that usually ends up taking care of itself. And and also even the example with the disciples, even though all of the disciples were hiding on that third day, nobody was a welcoming party with fireworks when the stone rolled away from the tomb. And so Peter denied Christ. And so even in those moments, long term, if you build a team, it works. And even if one of them goes rogue, scorched earth, bad mouthing you, putting your dirty laundry about the church and leadership on their Facebook and blasting you, calling friends in the church. And even if all of that happens, if you build a strong enough team, God prevails. God's purposes prevail. And so it's worth it, even in those cases.
That's good.
Very
All right.
good.
Who else?
Can I jump in here?
Please do.
This is Vicky in Mexico. I just had two things I wanted to share as I've been listening to everybody. But when I first went out as a missionary, I was FCF, but I was also Youth with a Mission. So I went through a lot of their training and was with them for 6 years. And one of the things that they used to tell us was the number one reason why missionaries left the field was because of personality conflicts with the people they were working with, not the people they were ministering to, but the team structure, that they would be conflict, it would be insecurity, and it would be like, I'm going home. So that's one point for leadership. But the second thing I was going to say is it kind of goes with everything else. A really wise book called A Tale of Three Kings. And it deals with the kingship of Saul, the kingship of David, and then the attempt of and this son's name just left me, that tried to rise up against him. David's son, who tried, Absalom. So he tried to raise up and become the king, take it away from David. So it showed David as a under king, you know, how he treated the king, authoritative king over him. It showed David as king, and then it showed David as a king who's being threatened by an underling trying to rise up and take his throne. And it's a super wise book. I think the author was Gene Edwards. But if you haven't read that as a leader, I think every leader should read it.
Awesome. Does anyone else? Teresa, I saw your message. Thanks for joining us today. She's got to go take care of something. Anyone else have anything to say or to discuss? Carla, you're on.
Yeah, I was thinking about in light of, people doing things and doing it differently, because that is hard. It's hard to let go of that because you kind of have a vision in your mind of how something's going to be done. And it kind of took me back. I was thinking about when Ernie was talking about that, with our kids at home. I don't personally have kids. I have nieces and nephews. But with our kids at home, we teach them to make the bed or to sweep or to clean the bathroom or, and that alleviates things that we have to do, but it also trains them and teaches them, to do stuff. And if you've ever seen a kid make a bed, it looks like the bed. Who cares if the sheets get made? Just make sure the top covers on. Nobody on that. And we go through that kind of training process of, and there's a part of you that would like to go back behind them and redo it, but you kind of, in good parenting, hold yourself back and say, no, I can go back and point out things to them about how to do it, but I'm not going to go behind them and redo it, And I think about that with ministry. Our children learn because we teach them and we kind of lead and guide them through the process and let them do it and let them make mistakes and grow from those mistakes, and eventually they learn how to make a bed, when they get older, if they choose to. And so I think about that even in ministry, that is the process that we're walking through is, we don't expect children to be born and stand up and walk, they crawl, right. They stumble, they fall, we pick them up. We don't say, well, you foolish child, fell down, but we say, oh, you did that, yay, you'll be better next time, we encourage them and everything. And so I think about that, in ministry, that we are walking through that same type of process. And I know they are going to do things that differently than us. And we may think, I would have done that differently, or I think I could have done that better. And yet that's a part of the growing process. If they never have that, they're never going to grow because they don't have that. They're not exercising those muscles and learning things. And I kind of relate that back when I was in my 20s and 30s. I lived with a lot of people, different families, different roommates. Just a lot of different people I ended up living with. And someone asked me one time, they said, how do you live with all those different people? Don't they get on your nerves? And I said, I would get on my nerves just living with me. So how do I expect somebody else not to get on my nerves? So yeah, sometimes that happens, and it's kind of the same thing with when we're working with, sometimes it may not be the best way, but it's a way and it works. And they're learning and building muscle through that. And in 2020, the Lord spoke to me and he said, trust the work of the Holy Spirit, trust the work of my Holy Spirit in you. And so, for like 6 months, that was just really, okay, I need to trust the work of the Holy Spirit, what God's doing in me, even though sometimes I don't see that. About 6 months later, he spoke to me. He said, trust the work of my Holy Spirit in other people around you.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes for us as leaders is we consider ourselves faith people and, we trust and believe, but sometimes walking in that faith is actually stepping back and trusting the work of the Holy Spirit in those that God's leading or that we're leading. So.
Man alive, Carla, first of all, have you been in my house recently? Because I have a 12-year-old son and we do require him to make his bed in the morning, but it has gotten to the point where he has not tucked his sheet under his mattress. And so his sheet is literally hanging out the end of the bed, but you know, it's nice on top. That's fine. And also my husband and I are the exact opposite. He likes to tell exactly how it needs to be done. And I'm just like, it's done. Let them do whatever. That's so good. One of the questions that we have on the self-assessment is, do you avoid hearing facts or truth for fear that it clouds your faith? You know, and that's a hard one to ask yourself. Do you avoid hearing the truth? Do you avoid hearing what's actually here because you don't want it to cloud your faith? Do you not have enough faith in your own faith to see the truth or the facts and believe past it? That might be a different way to word it. Carla, I love your heart. Jesse, you're unmuted. What do you have to say?
I was going to mention something Carla made me think of is people doing it and not doing it very well, or making a mistake and it just not being up to par. We were portable for the first couple of years of the church. And so we had a trailer and all of our equipment in it. And the guy that was driving the trailer emptied the trailer and was going to go get gas on a Sunday morning. And so with a big empty trailer, the truck drives much differently. So he's driving a little bit more careless and getting gas, and turned too sharp, and the back axles of the trailer hit a curb and actually bent the axle, twisted the trailer, cracked parts of it and things, and it just an absolute mess. And so I remember being in leadership meeting the next week, and some of the people were talking about this, and one of the people was upset and like, that guy can never drive the trailer again. And I said, well, actually, he's the person I want driving the trailer now, because he's going to be driving so careful. And so after we fixed the trailer, gave the keys right back to him. And I said, hey, I know you didn't mean to do that. I know that it was an accident. And he was like devastated. Can I show my face at the church ever again? You know, and so just telling him, you know what, I don't trust anyone more than I trust you. And so I want you to drive the truck next week. And like what a difference that makes. And then with him driving, like there was never an issue. And that's an expensive training opportunity. And so I wasn't going to waste that. And so, but that's what we have to do. And then what you were saying about faith and hearing negative reports. It is necessary to take our head out of the sand and see reality, get the facts, as uncomfortable as it can be, because it's not faith to avoid that. Faith doesn't actually activate until it looks impossible. Faith doesn't even have a platform to move until we actually get the bad information, the facts, look at it, and then say, well, this is really bad. God, I'm going to trust you. And so we're deceiving ourselves if we think, well, I'm just going to trust God and live in faith while we're still ignoring the reality. That's not actually the way it works.
It's not. Carla, when you were talking, I was immediately reminded of the situation. For those of you that attended Vanguard, you probably saw my 12-year-old Hugo there. He was running the pro presenter, the lyrics and the slides and things like that. And I was nervous because he's never done something like that. Now, he's incredibly intelligent and can pick up on things real quick. So Jesse was over all of that stuff. So Jesse taught him how to do it. And Jesse was like, oh, he's going to be great. It's going to be fine. And he like totally was like, it's great. It's fine. We're in the first session and the slides are really slow and like things aren't going well. And I am texting Jesse. I'm like, can you maybe go back there? I don't think he can handle this. Come to find out, it wasn't even my 12-year-old that was doing it. It was a grown man, grown adult that was messing it all up. So I know some of us have hard time like trusting younger people with certain tasks, but let me remind you that you can make mistakes at any age. And maybe it's time you pass some of the things along to the younger people because they're more readily available to do it and eager to have the opportunity to serve. Hugo is now going to be asking our church if he can do the slides for them because he noticed they were shorthanded last night. So he wants to, he's like, I know how to use Google Slides. I know how to use ProPresenter. I'm happy to do that for them. And, like give these people, no matter the age, some kind of responsibility and they'll take it and run with it. Maybe even do something that you never thought of. That's what I keep telling people at this point. Cole, Jesse's son, is starting to edit our videos for us. I just don't have the time for it. He's capable. He wants to do it. We're happy to pay him. I'm letting a 16-year-old edit our FCF videos, and I love it. It's great. He communicates well. Put the expectations out there. It doesn't matter the age.
Excellent.
Okay, we're going to be closing here. John, our team has been asking the question, what realities am I not facing personally? Man, that is a tough question. It's hard. But those are healthy questions to ask. And I will encourage you with this, John. Those are signs that you are not a sociopath. If you can ask yourself those questions, you're not a sociopath. Hey!
I think
you're welcome for the encouragement. You can pass that along.
I think with the word of faith culture that we've been involved with for so long, one of the challenges I had to deal with when you talk about facing the facts and facing truth is, we pride ourselves on Mark 11, right? 23, 24, speak to the mountain. But if you've ever been driving on a road trip and the sun is hitting just right, whether it's going up or coming down, and you'll see clouds in the horizon. Sometimes those clouds look like mountains. They look like hills. And one of the things the Lord showed me was that sometimes we're speaking to mountains that are not really mountains. We see things from our own perspective because of our vantage point, but it's not really a mountain. And so we begin to speak and utilize our faith and try to tap into the faith and exercise our faith for something that is not even required. If we just understood what we were looking at, we could approach it without even having to exercise faith. It's just a lot of practical solutions if we engage the team and look at the facts and look at truth instead of just assuming that what we're looking at is a mountain.
If you were at Vanguard, you know what I made people do with the word assume. I'm not going to do it here.
Yes.
But
exactly.
Only because Ernie said no.
I just want to interject real quickly. I think that facing facts, when facts come up, things that may be negative or appear to be negative, it's such a great opportunity to then ask questions about that. What are the contributing factors to this? How did this come to be? When did we first start to see things move in this direction?
That's good.
Asking some questions and then dealing with those questions, because sometimes the facts that we are presently looking at are just symptoms and they're not really the root. And
that's so good.
I think asking some pertinent questions can bring us to a place where we examine some of the root causes and then can really apply our faith or take action or do all of the above and begin to see change.
That's
just
so good.
Quickly add to that, and that is, this is a great example of why you shouldn't do ministry alone.
Yes.
Because these are the conversations you have with people that are not in your daily sphere, who can have a different perspective and help you lean into something. And examine it from a whole different perspective, a whole different filter, and be able to see something differently than how maybe you or even your team can't see past because of your culture or whatever. And so I think that's a great perspective, leaning in. This is something we learn in therapy. Instead of being afraid of our emotions and trying to push them down, lean into them. Why do I feel this way? Clearly, my emotion is an indicator of something. What's it for? So if we know that we have to do that to emotionally process something, then shouldn't we do the same thing to practically process something? And then I'm also going to preach a minute, because you all know how much this means to me. And that is the Romans 4:19 principle of, I just went blank, Abraham. The scripture, most translations, the not is not there. I say this all the time. It doesn't say that he considered not his own body. It actually says he considered his own body. and the deadness of Sarah's womb. He looked at it, he examined it. He wasn't afraid, he didn't avoid it. He looked at it, but yet he knew that God's promise was greater than the fact. So there's another example. You always look at the facts. You always lean into it.
Absolutely.
But we always know our God is always greater. He's always going to give us the answers. He's always going to lead, guide, and direct us when we position ourselves for him to do so. And so I hate avoidance, mainly because that's my go-to. Stuff it down, avoid it, move away, ignore it. And that is so not God's plan.
You know, what you said about Abraham, it was his body and the deadness of her womb that was trying to distract. Remember that statement I made here recently? I read it somewhere. It says, what you get distracted by is never as important as what you get distracted from.
Yeah.
So there was those things that tries to get our attention and it's drawn us away from what God has said to us. Just like Peter, whenever he walked on water, he saw the wind boisterous. A lot of times we preach, he got his eyes on the water. Yeah, but notice what Jesus said. I think it's a New Living Translation, but he said, Peter, why did you doubt me? Boy, that brings it right back into the mainstream of what we're dealing with. What are we getting distracted by isn't as important as what we get distracted from. And what God, I think, is telling us as an organization, he never did expect us to do this thing alone. That's what he's given people around us. And the thing that Jesse did with Hugo, we can hinder people's maturity and people's growth if we don't have higher expectations on them. Our expectations will either be high and we'll lift them up, or we'll have low expectations that will hinder them in their growth. So I think we just need to hear what the Spirit of God is saying right now with the breath of fresh air about the teams and how important the people are around us and how valuable they are, and how we have to get rid of any toxic tendencies that we might have had, because toxic leaders will repel good leaders.
That's good. Well, I have to say, I'm a little disappointed. None of us disagreed with each other. I was really hoping that we could use that as an example that you can respectfully disagree with one another and still love each other, because you can. Your team should not all say yes to you. Your team should have their own opinion, their own perspective. They should be able to say no, or have you thought about this? And I'm a little disappointed we couldn't example that for you today. I guess everybody was on their A game, maybe. Anybody want to argue right now real quick?
I think we did disagree. I kind of disagree with what you just said.
I could make everybody say ass again, because we did talk about assuming. And then we could really ruffle some feathers. I'm sorry if I offended you people. I make people, it's what I do to my 12-year-old, trying to remove assumption from our everyday life. And so in order to do that, I make him be uncomfortable by saying, what happens when you assume? Anyway, I want to remind everybody really quick, October 13th here in Tulsa, it is a live event, our Emotionally Healthy Leader Workshop with Reading Revival, Patrick Norris and Dr. Todd Bowman. They're going to be working through it. It is $40, and that includes your lunch. So it will be like a 9 to 5 situation. Hotel information, car rental information, and addresses will be released tomorrow. So please make sure you open that email and look at everything that there is to say about it. And then, of course, save the date, November 17th at 2 p.m., we will be having our Q4 event. Instead of doing it in December, which is the busiest time for you pastors, we decided to do it in November so that you can go into the last month of the year encouraged and ready to keep going, instead of feeling like you're drowning with all of the Christmas pageants that all of these kids are doing and all of the wrapping paper, because that's how I feel in December, and I don't even pastor. Anyway, October 13th and November 17th, keep those dates in mind. Also, I want to let everybody know right now, Vanguard 2023 is happening in June of next year. Dates will be released very, very soon. But please, June 2023,
Good.
Start planning. It's going to be different again, because we're leading the way with new ideas and developments, especially in the church and in ministry. Nothing has to look the exact same. Everything can be different because God created us all to be individuals. If he wanted us to be ants, he would have created us to be ants, but he didn't. I'm a person, darn it, and people like me. Does anybody remember that? Thank you for the validation. Okay. I am so happy we did this. Listen, this is one of our passions to do, is have conversations. We love talking. If anybody needs some brainstorming or whatever, you can feel free to contact us. We're happy to work through any of the issues you're going through with your leadership development. If you are an affiliate or associate church pastor, Miss Cookie is traveling to our affiliate and associate churches. We have already gone to 2, and we have 2 scheduled for the rest of this year. Tucson, I'm talking to you. We're coming soon. If you want to get that on the books for next year, we would love to go ahead and schedule that. It helps us plan our year best. We meet with your staff, we meet with you, and we help bridge or build any bridge that we need to with communication, with vision, with unity, whatever that looks like, at no cost to you. We're coming to you on our dime. We're paying for the flights if we have to fly, or for the gas and the hotel, and we supply breakfast for your leadership team. So if you want us to do that, please contact me. You all have my email address, whitney@fcf.org. I'm happy to start that conversation with all of you. All right. Thank you guys so much for being a part of today. And we will see you hopefully in October. And if you can't make it, we'll see you in November. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.